Hey viewers, and Daniel in here right now, and then we can get started talking about his new release on Naked Wines and his amazing illustrator winemaking.
Hey, and now I see you.
Now we're live. We did it.
We did it. Do we have all of our friends, our angels and guests?
Yep, we got 23 and climbing.
Wow. Okay. Does
So
everybody want to meet the consultants?
First, they have to meet you.
Okay.
We are here, angels, with Daniel Barron. He's a legend. He joined Naked Wines in December of last year, and he's been making us beautiful, beautiful wine ever since, which is just releasing today. In his career, he's worked at Dominus Estate, Silver Oak, Tuomi Cellars, and I think he spent a year at Chateau Petrus, correct?
Correct.
And yeah, I'm so excited to be here with him today. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he has the best wine consultants in the industry.
That's right. They're very expensive. Here's Hamilton. Uh-oh.
Little lower.
Desk. And Beatrice. Yeah. Say hi to everybody, B. Okay. Yep.
They're so cute.
And we are so excited to be here on the day of the release of the francophone Cabernet. There you can see it. And soon we will be releasing the francophone Pinot Noir in January, right, Ella?
Yes, in January, I'm pretty sure. It looks beautiful. Very excited.
Both tasting beautifully. Both are really lovely right now. So, yeah. So, do you have any questions for me, Ella?
I have so many questions for you, Daniel.
Okay.
Christopher's saying that's quite a resume. He loves Tuomi and Silver Oak. So you got some fans in the house. Do you want to start off by telling us the story behind the francophone label? Because you just showed it off and it looks so good.
Well, you know, the label, first the francophone name, you know, I'm reminded my desk is acting up. Ah! The raise and lower desk. My professor at UC Davis was the great breeder, Harold Olmo, which is another story that we've named one of our wines for him. But he used to say, creating grapevines is the easy part, naming them was the hard part. And with naming a wine label, it's, first of all, you need to find a label that makes sense to you, and then you need to see if anyone else owns it. So it took us a long time, and we did focus groups and did a number of things, but I really like francophone. Francophone always gets a smile from people because the francophone actually means someone who speaks French, but it also has kind of a double entendre because I think of French telephones, and one of the things that it links for me is the two threads of my winemaking career, which were in Bordeaux, France, and particularly Napa Valley. And the label, we worked with two wonderful designers, and the Gatos, Tim and Raquel, and they're very creative, and we did a number of iterations that came up with this idea that it's kind of like a patent drawing. And if you see, that's an old French telephone that has the second speaker on it. And then we have these kind of shooting electric bolts that, you know, kind of go back to the days of Thomas Edison and the great electrical inventors and Tesla and all those guys. So it's really fun. And I think the label reflects a certain whimsy and fun that I have making wine, which is one of my favorite things to do.
That's awesome. It looks beautiful, and I can't wait to get it on my shelf. officially, because I did have
You
that
can
one
see
unofficial bottle.
another couple of inspirational labels behind me. The Chateau Magdalene, and of course the wines of Petrus. So we have the great classics in mind too.
Can you go back and tell me the story of how you came to work at Chateau Petrus for a year?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because one of the questions that you had kind of tossed out, things that you might ask me, was what were some of the surprises in my career? And certainly ending up at Chateau Petrus was an amazing surprise because I went to France for a sabbatical year to work at a winery, and the job fell through because the labor laws changed. And I spent 6 months wandering around France without a job. I worked at 7 chateaus in the 1981 harvest, but I was really fed up with France and I was ready to leave. I had my merchant marine card and I was going to go to Rotterdam and ship out. And then through a series of just crazy coincidences, I ended up meeting the owner of Chateau Petrus, Christian Moex. And because I'd spent 6 months in France, my language skill was good, but more importantly, I knew the customs and how business meetings went, which are so different than here in the US. I mean, you don't start talking business until, well, first of all, you have to have a meal together. And then you have to talk about your dogs and your family and your aspirations and literature and everything under the sun. And then just when you think that, I guess I misunderstood that there was some business to transact, then they start talking business. So I understood that by the time I met Christian. And my first meeting with him, I remember I showed up at 9 in the morning and we started talking about business at 6 p.m. And I knew that was completely normal. But if that had happened my first month in France, I would have been completely befuddled and probably would have left about 3 o'clock, and then the surprise was not only that I was there, but that it opened all these doors to meet, the top chateau owners and winemakers of the Bordeaux region, because Christian was training me to take over this crazy venture that, he said, look, I have no idea if this is going to work out. If it does, I'll put you in charge. We'd known each other for 3 weeks. I thought that was kind of wild. And if it doesn't work out, how bad can it be? You'll have spent 1982 at Chateau Petrus, and who knows, maybe it'll be a good vintage. Well, it ended up being one of the greatest vintages in Bordeaux history. So, but who is to know? In October of 1981, when we were first talking about it, who knew what 82 was going to be?
Right. And when you say it was one of the best vintages ever, what does that mean? What comes together to make a beautiful vintage?
Well, in Bordeaux, in that era, Ella, it's a great question because the answer is different for each region. But in that era in Bordeaux, before climate change had really kicked in, it would be pretty cold and rainy. And they considered they made great wines. There were 5 great vintages in a century. And and maybe, which if you think about it, it means that 19 years out of 20, they're making less than perfect wines, and that there were, very good vintages, probably 5 or 6 in a century. So in those days, it meant that it was sunny and warm, that the rains fell at the right time, that there wasn't a lot of rot. I was there in 81, which no one considered a vintage of the century. The Merlot was, kind of rotting off the vines. It was raining as we were harvesting. We were slogging through the mud. We had enough hot water for 2 showers, and there were 60 pickers. So the trick was to be at the end of the vineyard at 5 to 6 towards the showers so that you could be, you know, one of the first two to get a hot shower. I figured that out after the second day.
And that's
But
why you're
you would
such a
just,
successful winemaker. You have a good mind for logistics.
that's
That's like
it.
half
You
the
got to
game.
think things through, right?
Yep.
Learn from your mistakes.
Could have called it right from the beginning, from that first shower you got. Day 2 at Petrus. Do you think that that's true still in California and today, that there's like 5 perfect years out of a century?
No, I think in California we have, I don't know, I don't think there's ever a perfect year. I think we have more great years in California. And in France, it's warmed up quite a bit, although this is being a terrible vintage in Bordeaux with frost and rains and heat waves. But they've had quite a run of great vintages in the aughts and the teens, because it's gotten significantly warmer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Why do you think so? They've just struggled with it being cold. Over here, we have better vintages because the weather's just more favorable.
Here, I mean,
what makes Sonoma and Napa so
that
perfect?
we don't have wildfires nearby is a great, like this year there was a fire that started yesterday over by Nicholson Vineyard, but it was contained pretty quickly and the smoke was short-lived. And I actually think the cooler, the milder vintages are the greater vintages here. I think our enemy is really these intense heat waves that get the fruit, the pulp ripe before the skins are.
Yeah, right. So what are you looking for when you want to bring your fruit out? You have a pretty interesting technique.
Hang on one second.
Okay. And if you want to prop your phone down, you can set it on something so it doesn't have to, you don't
Yeah,
hold
I
up.
can prop it up here. It just is
Perfect.
far away. There. How's that?
Awesome. Perfect.
Good. What was your question, Ella?
My question was, what are you looking for when you pick grapes? How do you decide what you're going to make?
Oh, well, that's a great question because, you know, when I was at Petrus, I was very surprised because I was the sampler and I went out and sampled and I did what I had been taught to do, which is I brought the grapes back in, and I processed them, and I got the sugar, acid, and pH. And Jean-Claude Barrouet, who became a lifelong friend, but was the winemaker for all of the Etablissement Jean-Pierre Moix wines, said, "Oh, good, they're getting close." And I said, "Oh, are we going to pick?" And he just laughed. He said, "No, we can't pick until we've tasted the fruit." And so we went out into the vineyard and walked the vineyard and tasted the fruit and chewed on the berries. And then we would discuss each block. And it was the first time I had seen that. And I came back to Dominus, and that's what we did at Dominus. And then I brought that technique to Silver Oak when I moved there in '94. But of course, Silver Oak had many more vineyards, much higher volume. And I was really excited when I saw a seminar on berry sensory analysis, which is a method to taste the fruit, just like we taste wine. You know, I'm going to taste the francophone, the 2019 francophone, and I'm going to swirl the glass and I'm going to smell for fruity aromas and if there are any defects, which of course there aren't, and then I'm going to sip and aspirate and evaluate the wine. Well, this is a method to do the same thing with grape berries, with a specific way to evaluate, and particularly to chew on the skins 15 times and to see if they dissolve. And the beauty of that method is that it shows you when the cell walls are breaking down in the skins, which is what really allows us to get all the flavor, the tannin, the color out of the skins and into the free run wine. And so I use that technique now in all my vineyards. I still do the chemical analysis, but I make my final decision based on the texture of the skins.
And are you out there in all of your vineyards for Naked Wines doing the sampling and
Oh my
checking
goodness.
on your grapes?
Yep, I was out this morning with Hamilton and Beatrice. Of course, the ultimate is when they want to eat the grapes, then I know that they're right. They're the final judges. Yeah, I was out in the vineyard, and it's interesting because this vineyard has rather low sugar, but the skins are already breaking down. And so I know that as soon as I get to a level where I have enough alcohol to extract, that I can go ahead and pick these. The other thing I'm looking for in the Bordeaux varieties is for the pyrazines, the green pepper molecules, to have dissipated, so that I know that character is not going to be dominant in the wine.
Right. So what else are you looking for? Can you tell us about what francophone wines are going to taste like once Angels can get their hands on them?
Well, one of the things that I'm aware of is that we're releasing these wines fairly young. So I'm looking for the tannins to be resolved, and I'm also in the processing. I'm trying to extract as much color and flavor as I can without getting an excess amount of tannin. And these wines are, I'm so excited to share this wine with you guys because it is drinking so well right now. It's got some great kind of cola and blackberry character, and the tannins are very soft. It's completely bone dry, but it has a fruit sweetness to it. And it has to do with, I wish I knew. It has to do, because a lot of it is how we blend, and with many years of blending experience, sometimes I surprise myself as to, how things come together. But this really is exactly what I intended, and I think you're going to really love it.
When you talk about blending, what does that mean exactly? Are you blending together different grapes? Are you blending together grapes from different areas? Are you blending together different tanks, barrels?
Well, in this case, it could be any of those things. But in this case, it was blending together primarily Cabernet Sauvignon. I got a little bit of Petit Verdot that I purchased because I wanted to give a little more color and depth to the wine in the mid palate. But this is I'm trying to remember, 2019 was from one vineyard, but it was 5 different blocks. And so figuring out the proportion and what goes together, and those are different clones of Cabernet Sauvignon, which means that they came from different mother plants that were developed, or, what's the word I'm looking for? Propagated to make, because of their different flavor and color characteristics.
Right. So you would breed one to have like higher acid, and one to have stronger color, and one to have more fruity aromatics, or something like that?
Yeah, one might tend more towards blue fruits. One might have a little more of the Cabernet. Look, it's Cabernet Sauvignon. It's wild. It's savage. So that's some of the herbaceous character, which I don't think is a negative. It's a negative when it gets to green pepper, but there should always be a little herbal character to Cabernet Sauvignon. Otherwise, it's not the varietal. It might as well be Syrah or Petit Syrah. So that's the other thing, is that I believe in picking at moderate alcohol to get that character of fresh fruit. When the grapes start to taste pruny or jammy, to me, they've gone a little too far. And I'm looking for that characteristic of fresh fruit, which I find, a wine made like that is kind of refreshing. It's not heavy on the palate. It doesn't make you, feel like you have to go take a nap as soon as you finish the glass.
And it pairs with so much more. You can enjoy it with just about anything. You don't need to have like a huge steak.
So much better. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to have with your Francophone Cabernet when you can get a whole cake?
Oh boy. Well, we live in such a wonderful cornucopia here in California. So I bought a lamb from a great butcher called Willowside Meat out in Guerneville Road. And the other night, it's a very funny story, because my wife is a wonderful cook. And I came home from a long day in the vineyard, and she said, we're having lamb ribs. I noticed we had ribs. I'd never had lamb ribs before. And I
Wow.
said, well, these are amazing. What was the marinade? And she said, you know, all those little containers of hoisin sauce and soy sauce and sriracha, and that we have from when we
She
have
had cleared out like the
tofu.
takeout drawer.
She emptied the door of the refrigerator,
That's
and
funny.
that was the marinade. So I said, well, that's great, but you can't ever duplicate it again. She said, oh, sure. In another 3 months, the door of the refrigerator will be full again.
Kitchen
It'll
sink
be a
ribs.
little different, but it was amazing. So I would have this wine any day with lamb ribs, lamb chops, roasted chicken, even salmon or sturgeon, which are great red wine fish.
So
And
versatile.
I love a good grilled ribeye. And again, speaking lamb, lamb burgers. Oh my God, so good. On Model Bakery English muffins.
Ooh, those are so
And
good.
I know.
I don't know where I heard this, but I heard that those are Oprah's favorite, and I don't know why, but I take her as an authority on English muffins.
They are Oprah's favorite. It's true. So if
Yeah.
anyone makes a pilgrimage to Napa, go to Model Bakery. There's one in St. Helena, one in the Oxbow. But I'll warn you, when you grill them, your hands are just covered with butter. I don't know how much butter
True.
they must. When
Yeah.
you eat the burger, you're just coated with butter.
It's so
But
worth
I
it.
was
So
thinking
worth
about
it.
one of your other questions, Ella, and
Mhm.
about surprises. And
Yeah, I saw that come up in the chat.
yeah, and one of the I was musing on the surprise, you know, and I don't know if everyone saw, because I think we were offline, but one of the reasons I have an office outside of my home is all the baseball memorabilia, and the Tom Glavine, the bottle we did for Tom Glavine, Nomar Garcia Parra's jersey from Oakland, Brett Saberhagen, who is the MVP of the World Series in, I think, '84.
You're quite the fan.
Felipe and Orlando, and the Red Sox infield with Brett Saberhagen and Nomar. This is Marquise Grissom's bat, a game bat that he handed me. And one of the things that I never figured was that, and this was particularly true of Silver Oak, that I would get to meet all these celebrities and get to hang out with them. And I realized one of the things that my father taught me was to find the humanity and the humility in everyone, and conversely to find the nobility in even the entry-level workers, you know. So
Yeah.
it's something that has been very uplifting for me. There's a woman at Bin to Bottle, where a lot of the naked wines are being made this year, named Lorena Ortiz, and she basically runs the cellar. And you know,
Big job. At Bin to Bottle, that's a huge job.
And she is a force of nature. I mean, she'll be running 2 presses and the crusher and racing around on the forklift and whistling. She has this, you know, really loud whistle if she sees anyone doing anything wrong. When Lorena whistles, everyone stops.
My goodness. Good, she's trained them. That's perfect.
To be able to relate to everyone from, you know, that level of blue collar worker to, you know, the owner of Chateau Ikem is a gift that my dad gave me, that I think has really contributed to my success and my fulfillment, because that's something that that's very important to me and really enriches my life. So, and also that combination of nobility and confidence and humility is really important, because one person can really make a difference.
Yeah.
Nobody knows everything, and we all make mistakes,
right.
and hopefully we learn from them.
I think that's definitely something that makes you connect with Naked Wines Angels a lot and has probably
Yeah,
brought you through this company after your super successful career. And I mean, I admire that in you so much. We have another question from Christopher. He
yeah.
says, you grew up on Long Island. Have you ever gone back to visit, or did you settle in California and never look back? Second question, New York wine. What's your opinion?
New York wine. Oh, this is both from Christopher. So yes, I have gone back, and it, it's hard. It's hard for me to imagine. You know, it's so different there than California, because it seems so congested. But I do love going to New York City, and I actually, if Christopher, are you in Long Island? Is he? Can he answer that?
You might answer that. Let's just keep talking while he types it out.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the funny things is my dad passed away, and one of his great joys was playing on the red clay courts at Bethpage State Park. And so I decided to go there and bury his ashes by the tennis court.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I thought I'd go in March and there'd be no one there, but since I left, they've enclosed the tennis courts and the place was just full, and there were people golfing, and I was out selling wine, so I was in a sports jacket and slacks and good shoes, and everyone was in their golfing and tennis clothes, and I'm skulking around in the bushes with a baggie of gray powder, and it's amazing I didn't end up in jail. But that was one of my returns to Long Island. But I love it. I love having those roots, and I'm still connected to a lot of my friends from Wanta through Facebook, of all things.
Awesome. Cool. We have a follow-up. This question kind of relates to that. Beth wants to know, what's the most prominent difference between cold weather and warm weather wines?
Great question. But I want to finish. I never answered Christopher about New York wines. You know, I've kind of gotten out of touch with New York wines. There was a time I was involved in the very early days with Alex Hargrave, going out to the North Fork of Long Island. And I actually think there's great potential out there climatically. I think the sandy soils aren't great for profound reds, but it's a very good climate analog to lots of areas in France. So I think it's got great potential. And of course, the Finger Lake wines. I know Naked has someone up there making Finger Lake Rieslings. They can be stunning. And Cornell has contributed a great deal to the literature and the research, and some great viticulturists and winemakers have come out of Cornell's program. Okay, so
true.
the question was about
the difference between cold weather and warm weather grapes and wines.
Very interesting question. Cool weather, without getting too technical, one of the ironies of the Bordeaux varieties, let's talk about that, because that's in Bordeaux, the experts will readily acknowledge that historically Bordeaux is too cool for the varieties they're growing. It's a geological or geographical accident. The reason wines were developed in Bordeaux is because the roads were unsafe and they were losing wine shipments to highwaymen. And so they looked for an area they could plant vineyards that was near a port so they could ship overseas. And,
oh, wow.
And they started growing grapes in Bordeaux. And you got to love the French, because as I said earlier in this talk, they said, you know, 1 year in 20 we make excellent wine, and that justifies the other 19 years. You know, that model wouldn't work in American business, right?
No, it wouldn't. But
to the French, that you know, to create 1 year in 20 or one try in 20, you create something of exquisite beauty that justifies the venture. So in Bordeaux, at least prior to global warming, a great vintage was defined as a short vintage, one in which it was warm and you ripened, say, Cabernet Sauvignon from veraison, from the coloring of the fruit, which is a marker in the season, to harvest at, say, 35 days. The average being 45. In California, especially in the Napa Valley, we're growing Cabernet in an area that's really too warm for the variety. So the great vintages, Christian Moix and I, when we were researching this, we found the great vintages were the long vintages, the ones in which veraison to harvest was 50 days, 53 days instead of 45. So we could say that in the warmer regions, you're looking for the cool season, the season without a lot of heat waves, and in a cooler climate, you're looking for more heat. But to generalize, in a cooler climate, you're going to get the skins are going to be ripe before the pulp being the sugar and acid. In a warmer climate, the pulp is going to ripen first and then the skins. So in a warmer climate, you're going to tend to make wines that, to get those ripe flavors, you're going to tend to make wines with higher alcohol. And in a cooler climate, you're going to tend to have more acidity and more expression of herbaceousness. So that's the trade-off. And they're very, very different. On top of that, you have the fact that in many of the old world vineyards, the soils have been planted to grapes for generations, and so the nutrients have been mined out of the soils by grape roots, and so you have lower vigor. You also, I just had a discussion with Andy Walker, the breeder at UC Davis, about an hour ago about the expression of aromatic thiols, the aromatic compounds in Sauvignon Blanc, which is one of the parents of Cabernet Sauvignon, in richer soils. So, you know, we're still learning about this stuff. And then the other factor, which is not part of your question, but is very interesting to me, in a warmer area, you tend to be drier, and in dry, warm areas, you tend to have more expression of grapevine viruses. And in a cooler area, it tends to be moisture, and you have more expression of grapevine funguses. So the French worry about Esca and Botrysphaeria canker, and the Californians worry about leaf roll and red blotch. The French don't even mention leaf roll. They don't see it.
That's crazy. That weird? Yeah. How does heat contribute to more leaf roll?
It's not the heat, it's the dryness that's associated with the heat. Gotcha. And the viruses, it's just like us. You know, why do you get sick when you're on an airplane? Because that air dries out your nasal passages, and the viruses can pass into your tissue more easily.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's weird.
So what about a place like
German Riesling? I don't know if anybody took up on that special offer of the German pack, but mine arrived yesterday, and G Step, whoever the hell he is, no, I'm having Gewürztraminer. How could I confuse them? And it's lovely. I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Gewürztraminer from Gerd. I love it. We have some other questions that popped in the chat. We have someone named Christopher from West Virginia who is reading your biography. You have a biography? And he says, you have such a fascinating life, and is wondering if you've ever written an autobiography.
Christopher, it's on my list of things to do. And my son, I said, you know, I should start posting blogs. And my 36-year-old son, who, by the way, just provided me with my first grandchild, yay!
Ooh, like a couple days ago, right? Good.
He said, Dad, nobody reads blogs anymore. Do a podcast. So if you guys want to hear some of my stories, go to the Winemaker's Journey on Apple Podcast or Spotify. The Winemaker's Journey. one of my sponsors is Naked Wines.
Woohoo! I
And
can't recommend the
you'll hear
podcast enough.
a lot of these stories and stories from a lot of my colleagues, which are really fascinating, as well as Andy Walker. I do a podcast with Andy Walker, so you can hear how grape rootstocks are bred. Yeah, lots of cool stuff. But no, I haven't written it yet. And yeah, at some point, if I actually really retire and I still have my wits about me, that's something I would like to do. There's so many great stories and so much to share. I just was privileged to be, in the midst of this development of California wine from the 70s to the 2020s, and then to be in Bordeaux at a period where there was tremendous growth and interest, and to benefit from the perspective of the old world winemakers was life-changing for me. And I would love to reflect on that.
You've had the most amazing seat to watch the most
Yes,
amazing
exactly.
wine, region in America flourish. I mean, if you ever wrote that, I'm sure we could make a naked book club and get all the angels to join. We could all have discussions.
Talking about the celebrities, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I'm watching President Obama's first inauguration, and I'm looking, and there's Yo-Yo Ma, who had visited me at the winery. And to speak about humility, all Yo-Yo Ma did the whole time was apologize for taking so much of my time. And it's like,
really,
you're Yo-Yo Ma, for crying out loud. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. It's like, oh my goodness, it was.
And there's so many incredible guests like that on your podcast. I mean, I've listened to so many episodes, and it's so entertaining, and the stories are phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have some more questions that are rolling in. Kaylee wants to know what you think the most difficult part of harvest is.
Oh, the funny thing, the most difficult part, that's a great question, and I probably would give a different answer every different week of harvest. I think one of the most difficult times of harvest, which I think will probably surprise most of you, is when nothing is picked yet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because picture, for Naked Wines alone this year, I'm sourcing fruit from 9 different vineyards. That may be an understatement. And it represents 23 different distinct vineyard blocks.
Wow.
So, 2 weeks before anything is picked, I have 23 vineyard blocks to sample, walk, taste, and try to decide, when to pick. Right now, it's down to 5 vineyards left, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 vineyard blocks. So I've gone from 23 to 6. And it's also the tension of having all that fruit out there is there going to be a heat wave? Is there going to be a wildfire? Is there going to be a rainstorm? Last Sunday, they said it was going to rain. I said it was going to rain, 8/100 of an inch. That's what it said in 1989, the night before it rained 1.5 inches and ruined all the Chardonnay and Napa and Sonoma. So there's a lot. And then you have the grower who's pressuring you to pick. And then you have the vineyard management companies who tell you, we can't schedule anything for a week. So you finally call and say, we're ready to go. And they say, we can put you on in 10 days. So what do you mean you're putting on in 10 days?
That's a long time.
So then you start scheduling fruit. So there's so much uncertainty. Once everything's in the barn, first of all, it's all in one place, So,
and you're safe from everything except maybe a power outage.
And then you're really safe from everything but your own mistakes. then you have the ability to if the fruit is good, and I'd much rather bring in sound fruit, and then you have to worry about are you going to miss something, make a mistake, or are your work orders going to be followed? And this is one of the expressions that keeps coming up, that you don't, and I think I said it on my post, you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. And so then it becomes an act of following up and making sure that the crew is not getting too tired, and that um, they're following through on what you said, because you not only have to follow your possible mistakes, but other people's, and make sure they're being nipped in the bud. And then it also helps to create relationships with people like Lorena Ortiz, and you get to know the cellar crew, and you chat with them, and then you find out, that, well, so-and-so is not really doing the pump overs that they say, so you figure out what's going on, and you figure out when to bring a 6-pack of beer and when to bring donuts. And there's a different way to manage your relationship in a contract crush facility than if you're having a estate winery.
Right, I imagine.
Right, you just have to have a feel for it.
Yeah. Okay, we have some other really great questions that are rolling in. I want to make sure that we get them.
I'll try to be short in my answer. But
no, you're great. You're great. We'll fit them. Beth was wondering if you've ever taught courses at a university.
I have never taught courses at a university, but I have given seminars, and I've guest lectured from time to time.
What were your lectures about?
About the physiological pruning that I learned at the University of Bordeaux. I also helped a class with graduate students at UC Davis, where they were all given grapes and asked to produce different wines and to come up. It was actually a really cool course. And Jennifer Higgins, who's another, was it Jennifer? No, it was Kristen Bernheisel. Kristen Bernheisel, who's a winemaker for J. Lohr. So they asked us to come in and coach these guys, and it was a whole thing where they had grapes. They had to come up with what style of wine they were going to make, what the label was going to look like, what the name of the wine was going to be, and we would coach them as to what winemaking decisions they needed to make in order to get to the style. So that was really fun.
That sounds like such a cool course.
Yeah, it was really great. And I'm misremembering it. They weren't making the wine, they had base wines. So they had to blend, they all got the same base wines, and they had different statements they wanted to make with the base wines. And then how were they going to blend them? They didn't have to use them all. And so they got to mix and match, and Kristen and I helped them realize their goals. So, yeah.
Well, if you want to help another knucklehead through making wine, I'm making some rosé in my kitchen right now.
Okay. All right. Anytime.
Okay, we have some more. Awesome. Speaking of children, is your son involved in the winemaking business? I know he is, because I heard your podcast episode for Father's Day.
Yes.
Can you tell us about what he's doing?
Well, I have 2 sons and a daughter, and my eldest son, Sam, is my partner in a small wine label we have called Complant, Complant. And Sam is also the winemaker at Kivelstadt Cellars. And he helps me out a little bit with the Naked Project from time to time. So Sam is a graduate of UC Davis, and did his stint working in New Zealand and Burgundy and Napa Valley. And he also worked for vineyard management companies for 3 or 4 years. So he's following in my footsteps, and
That's awesome. You're an inspiration.
Yeah, and I learn from him, and he learns from me. So it's really, really great. And my other son, Isaac, who's 33, is a computer programmer, and my daughter is a physical therapist. And she's 20. She will be 28 in December. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like a very successful family. Very, very happy. Everyone's following their passions.
We're,
Love to hear it.
you know, it's, you know, when people ask me what my greatest accomplishment in life was, it's having 3 children that like each other and have each other's backs. I think that is more important than any bottle of wine I've ever made. But not that I don't enjoy making wine, but raising healthy, happy children is really great. Yeah. Very
That's a
proud.
perfect place to end this.
Oh,
You're an
we're done.
inspiration. Those are beautiful final words. I mean, do you have anything else you want to say? We have maybe 1 more minute here.
Well, I
Closing
guess what
remarks.
I want to say is that I am having so much fun, and I really appreciate the Angels. And one of the things that we miss when we make big commercial wine is the direct interaction with the customers. And I love posting and hearing your comments. So please give me feedback, and I can't wait to hear what you think of this first release, because it's really very fulfilling to have such direct contact with the people who are going to enjoy the wine. So thank you all.
You're such a light and such a great teacher. It'd be a shame to hide you in the winery and the vineyard. So we're
Thanks,
very happy
Ella.
to have you also. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Say bye to all the Angels.
Bye, guys and gals.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you for joining.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye, Dan.
Take care.